Pulling his bike alongside the scene, Trevor stepped off his BSA. Eyes narrowing with intensity, the federal marshal approached the scene. Forensics were already inside doing what they do, and the beat cops had the ways in and out locked down. Flashing a badge and pushing aside yellow tape, he made his way inside. One of the locals he had come to know simply said, "Downstairs," and with a nod, Trevor frowned and made his way down the stairs to the basement. "This all seems a little familiar, doesn't it?" That was Trevor's Geist, Ravenous Jack, drifting behind him. Ravenous Jack was about 9 feet tall, and he didn't have much of a face at all. Instead, it had 3 rusty, crusted gears perpetually spinning where his face should be. It was beyond skinny, with ribs poking out of a slit in his chest cavity. It trailed his own intestines and meat as it moved, never capable of filling his stomach, and every once in a while he stopped, scooped those trailing organs back up with both hands, and jammed it into the gears, where it would be ground up and repeat the cycle again. Hence the name. Though it had no mouth to speak of, pun intended, Trevor could hear his cold, raspy voice in his head, and it never failed to elicit goosebumps from his flesh. Reaching the bottom, he couldn't argue with his other half. It was all familiar. The flickering fluorescent lights, the subtle genius of the murderous rig before him, and worse, the 2 corpses locked within them. It brought back horrific memories, and for a brief moment he could feel Ravenous Jack, far too in sync with him, ready to break. Swallowing it down, he made as if to go and check the victims when one of the officers let out a shocked shout and fell backwards. "Get the medics! We have a live one! Oh my god!" In a swarm of chaos and screaming, the medics came down and got to work. However, despite the turmoil, Trevor wasn't looking at the victim. He was looking at the impish figure behind him, grinning with teeth far too large for his face. The thing was drooling plasm. It was a Geist that had made the bargain with one of the dead men. It looked at him and Ravenous Jack with that same grin, but with curiosity in his eyes, and Trevor held a finger up to his lips in a shh gesture. See, like Trevor knew, the engineer didn't leave survivors, only broken toys and madmen, and he didn't know which he was, but at least he knew he'd have one more ally in a fight to bring that murderous fucker down. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Botch Pit. I'm Chris, Librarian of the Pit, and I'm extremely pleased to bring you the first part in our official coverage of Geist the Sin Eater's 2nd edition. Of course, we've done coverage for, the Underworld and whatnot, but this is the first time we're working with the finished product of the core rulebook. The initial guide we did was to the manuscript, and to be honest, I was not at all happy with the quality, as I was still learning what I was doing. So here we are, almost a year and a half later, and we're going to get nice and in-depth on this one. We've learned quite a bit, and here's to passing it on to you. Again, this is just an overview as to what Geist is. We do already have some other guides for it up. Feel free to skip the guide to the manuscript, because it was just full of clips and sadness. Let's start with a bit of background. Geist the Sin Eaters was released in August of 2009. Billed as the game of second chances, Geist was one of the last New World of Darkness products to come out before Onyx Path was established and the line was reincarnated as the Chronicles of Darkness. From the beginning, it was obvious that this was being set up as the heir apparent to Wraith the Oblivion. If not mechanically, then at least partially in tone. The echoes of Stygia can be felt in the descriptions of the Underworld, and with the way you had more Geist kind of has a version of the Shadow, which is more benevolent, meaning your Geist. In the initial version, it was set up that as your character died, a force of nature, a mini-death called a Geist, would approach you and offer you a deal. Go back to the land of the living bound to it, or pass on to wherever you are going to go. And for the most part, everything I just read about the first edition is where the similarities between editions end. That sticks with that. That's correct. But first edition is, well, a nightmare to really get through. The systems and rules are all over the place. The themes pull you so harshly between celebrating being quote-unquote more alive than you've ever been, and a stark, dark, morose setting bearing the moniker Memento Mori, which means to remember your mortality. The first edition didn't know exactly what it was. Was it a revitalized bringing the dead back to life? Or was it bringing life to the dead? It really didn't know what the hell it was doing. But the art was beautiful in it. The stylized paper was slick on the inside cover and the back cover, and color schemes were on point. They had, they had the cult support from the Wraith fans, but how much goodwill can you spare on a gamble of a game line? Not much. People were not pleased, and they didn't hesitate to let the world know it. Fortunately, Onyx Path and fans of the line in the little cult ghosty book were not ready to abandon it. The potential was still there, and after a highly successful Kickstarter campaign, we now have Geist the Sin Eater's 2nd edition. In full disclosure, I really love it, as I'm sure the followers of the channel can tell. I've covered the Underworld in depth and on the channel, and touched upon the, ghosts themselves a few times, but this is the first real entry into what our coverage for Geist is going to be like from the core book. So let's dig in. What's the overview of the 2nd edition, and why move over to it? Firstly, clarity. Not just in layout or terminology, but in tone and setting. No longer this whole back and forth bullshit about, is she dead or not? No, that's removed. As a Sin Eater, you are absolutely fucking dead. At that moment of death where the Geist approached you in proposed interrogation, called the bargain, The second you agreed, your soul actually moves on to where it's supposed to be, heaven or hell or whatever, and the Geist steps in, taking the place of your soul. That's right, at the core of it, the Geist is now your soul. Very important to really take into consideration when you're running this game. Another clarified, or perhaps more focused matter of the game is the Geist itself. A ghost becomes a Geist when they drink of the waters of the underworld and they jump up a few power levels, or ranks. When they do this, though, they lose a massive piece of self. Memories are washed away in the tides of intoxicating power, and though powerful, the Geist is aware that they're missing something. And they need someone with full access topside to get it back. That's where you come in. You're their ticket to unravel their mysteries and help them remember, and perhaps bring some closure to their tragic state of being. Another important note, in this edition, your Geist is not some afterthought, but more a secondary character you play along with your Sin Eater. They get their own version of a condensed character sheet, and likely your storyteller has to develop a deep backstory for them, that in order for the game to hit maximum fun, you as a player shouldn't really know about. There's nothing quite like being blindsided by finding out your Geist knows someone that you're running into, or they're affected by something they did. Stuff like that is really cool. And this matters because Geists now have a trait called Remembrance, which is a small description that is a major clue to their history. For the risk of going down the mechanics rabbit hole, which we'll come back to at a later time, I'm going to have to gloss over some of the details regarding that. Geists now have their own virtues and vices, bans and banes, something called a remembrance trait. There's so much more to them than there ever was, and that adds so much more to the game. And I'm not even going to get started on breaking points. There's so much to do in this, and it's such a pretty book. Another clarified difference is exactly how the Sin Eater is constructed and how they operate. Now being literally half dead, or I should say fully dead but still attached to the living, they have traits called Root and Bloom, which replaces their virtue and vices. The Root is the reminder that yes, you are dead, and what connects you to the underworld. The Bloom obviously is what reminds you of what in the lands of the living drive you there. The next stats I want to talk about that they clarified is Sync and Plasm. Gone is Psyche and convoluted ways in which Plasm functioned. Now, Sync is how in touch you are with your accompanying Geist and is of paramount importance. Once you are truly in sync and have recovered not just the Geist memories but their humanity, this is how they attempt, if they choose to along with you, to move on. Now, many of the Geist abilities, now called Haunts, mostly work in the Underworld and Twilight, not Topside. However, there are many exceptions to this, and they work utilizing the Geist itself as a conduit to the Underworld. They channel the Plasm through the Geist, then themselves when they are using the powers, which are now called Haunts, that work Topside. Crystal clear. Also gone are Archetype and Thresholds, now down to a simplified classification of Burden, which is exactly why you came back. You have the Hungry, which is the burden of having something in the land of the living you can't let go of. Next is the Bereaved, and those are the ones that lost someone they love and will go through the depths of the underworld to the peak mountains of the land of the living to find them. The Vengeful were wronged when they were alive, and they're back to kick ass and take names, but mostly kick ass. The Abiding simply wants to keep existing in any incarnation they can, living or dead. And then finally we have the Kindly, and these people wronged someone or others in general before they died, and they're back to make it right. Now, as far as Haunts go, once more, they replaced Manifestations, thank fucking God, and they're much more clear mechanically on how to use them before. In the first edition, the book made it seem, wrong or no, that you had to use something called a key to unlock the power. While keys are still around and they have different functions, they have been repurposed, and they're much more mechanically sound and not just a key mechanic to using the Haunts. Okay, that sounds tricky. You don't need to use your keys anymore to activate Haunts. They provide bonuses and may alter what they do, but you don't need the key to use them. At least most of the time, or 99.99% of the time. And then lastly, for the overview, I want to point out that the differences of the Underworld here and now. Before, the Underworld was almost an optional thing, a place you could go or not, without much benefit to going there. It was almost a chore. In fact, that area was such an afterthought that they didn't really draw much focus to it until they were releasing Geist Book of the Dead, which was rebranded as World of Darkness Book of the Dead after the commercial failure of Geist 1E, much the same as Slasher was meant for Hunter the Vigil and rebranded as a World of Darkness core line book to try and drive sales on it. Perhaps I'll do a breakdown of that at some point. Anyways, now being much more rooted in not being alive at all, you often frequent the Underworld to replenish Plasm, explore, hunt down keys and death masks, explore the depths for treasures, abilities, and washed away memories. There's just so much more to do. And that's not even talking about some of the things that happen in the land of the living that affect the Underworld that you may have to go and check out. I mean, gypsy caravans sit on top of, wagons from pilgrims that sit atop caves from cavemen down there. It's just a shit show, and it's beautiful, and I love it. In summary, Geist the Sin Eaters, despite a few editorial flaws, okay, a lot of fucking editorial flaws, is really what the first edition could and should have been, and there's easily years upon years of gameplay material contained herein, not even including crossovers and zoo campaigns for the aspiring Casper to do. I highly recommend it, and Onyx Path has continued the trend of releasing much more cohesive and put together second editions. I'll be covering this tons as I've already started to, and I hope to take you along with me to the Autochronous depths as we cover what it is to truly be dead in the world of darkness. Or Chronicles of Darkness. Oh shit. Fucking Richard Thomas is gonna come at me with a club. Chronicles of Darkness. I'm Chris, Librarian of the Pit, and thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share if this was helpful at all, and come say hi to us on the Discord and check out our other guides and videos. Have a great night wherever you are, above or below.